Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Policy Committee tonight, Wednesday, the 10th of September. Welcome to all members here. Visiting member, Councillor Angelina Marriott, good to see you. Members of the public within the chamber, and also members of the public who may be viewing us on the YouTube, the RDC, Rochford District Council YouTube channel. And of course, thanks to all officers to my right and left. Thank you for your time this evening. Right, we move into the agenda, and the first item is apologies for absence. I'm aware of Councillor Gary Myers, who sent his apologies and is being substituted this evening with by Councillor Arthur Williams. Good to see you, Councillor Williams. And I'm also aware that Councillor Linden has tendered his apologies. Not aware of any substitute. So there we are. Right, we have two sets of minutes before us, item 2 and 3. Minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of June. First of all, those are in the agenda pack, and they were brought forward from the last meeting, if you recall, and I trust members have read those. And can I have indication that you're happy for me to, or for those who are agreed? Councillor Hoy.
I will not agree them, but I'm not going to obstruct them either. It's still missing information, I believe, but I'll leave it as they are.
Right, but you're abstaining from agreeing, if that makes sense. Thank you, Councillor Hoy. So they are agreed by everyone else. And if I turn to item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of July 2025. Again, those minutes are in the pack. Are they agreed? Agreed? And there's a nod from Councillor Hoy there, so we're all right. Good. Item 4 is to receive any declarations of interest. Members, any declarations? Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. I was desperate to be Councillor Steptoe for a change. Essex County Council specifically, I serve on the Development and Regulation Committee, which obviously deals with minerals and waste within Essex, which is mentioned in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. That's been noted. Councillor Steptoe.
All I need to say is ditto.
And that's been noted as well. Thank you. Item 5, public questions on notice. There are no public questions for this meeting. That takes us to my report at item 6, which is the Chair's report. It's set out very much in 2 items there. The New Towns Task Force, you will recall that following our meeting on the 11th of June, a letter was sent to the Chair of the New Towns Task Force on the 17th of June. My letter is there for everyone to see, and we received an email response on the 4th of August, and I think that was received only after a little bit of chasing to the team to say basically that they noted our letter. So, but again, that reply is there. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Picking up on the theme of the letter to the Secretary of State, I've seen in the paper over the last couple of days that Southend Council are looking to withdraw their support of the 10,000 houses because they're not being counted to the total. Have we had anything officially on that?
Councillor Steptoe, you anticipated and have said very eloquently what I was going to say. I think the word that has been used in the BBC media today and also in the local media is could, so we need to be wary of words. It was a question that I asked just before this meeting, and we're not aware of anything other than what has appeared in the media. and it is interesting because the media report that I heard this morning is that they are concerned, and I've got to use the word allegedly because this is coming via media, but they are concerned that the numbers proposed in the expression of interest do not count according to their local plan numbers. And that is, if you recall, a concern of this administration as well. Hence why the letter was one of the main factors of why the letter was written. So there we are. Councillor Steptoe, you look as if you want to come back on something.
Yeah, just ready to say, Chairman, perhaps we ought to approach them, drop them a line or contact them, see if we can get something more official from them on that subject.
I'm sure that's been noted, and through officer circles, that information will be obtained. Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. The other letter there is the one that was sent by the leader, and I've got to compliment Councillor Adrian Eves, who started a piece of work drawing our attention to the fact that the proposed housing numbers did not align to the census growth in population in the area. And that generated a piece of work, and I'm grateful to officers for drafting a letter which was written to the former Deputy Prime Minister, and that was sent on the 21st of July. Again, the details of that letter, and thank you for the research that went into putting that letter together. And a reply came back on the 18th of August, also published within the agenda item, from Baroness Taylor, and I don't think there was a need to prompt for a reply there, but that came back just under a month after the Councillor Belton, the leader of the council, sent her letter, and it doesn't really give us a clear answer to the point that we made in relation to the population growth compared with the proposed housing growth, but there is a letter there. The other piece of work, which isn't reported here but has started, is to look at the empty homes within the district, because there is a feeling nationally that the number of empty homes sort of aligns to the 1.5 million new houses that are being proposed. So I know Councillor Belton, the leader, is particularly keen to get a little piece of work done to look at empty homes in the district, because it is obviously important that we use all opportunities to house our people. So that piece of work is underway, not obviously within my report, but because there isn't any detail, but that should be coming before us before too long. Councillor Hoy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. That's interesting to hear you say that. Is that something that's been agreed and reported via the Communities Committee, which is where housing lies normally?
You're getting that information hot off the press, Councillor Hoy. So you're in a privileged position to hear that the leader wants to work up a...
But it's been announced to the public tonight, and I think it'd be good for clarification.
It's not a particular announcement, it's just simply saying it's work that we're proposing to put in hand just to do some exploratory work on empty homes in the district. So it's not exactly breaking news.
Sorry, Chairman, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
However, I understand that surely it's for the committee to do that work, not for the leader to do that work. I'm sure it could be put to the committee.
I'm sure
why it's not working as it should.
I'm sure the leader will make sure that it goes through the appropriate channels. But in terms of looking at housing numbers, which is where I'm coming in from a planning policy, that is why I raised the point. But it will go through the appropriate channels, please be assured. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on a slightly different tact on that point of empty houses, I'm also very concerned about developments that aren't being completed. For example, the one I will use as an example is the old police station in Rochford. It's been permission. They started work on it. They're actually done some work, but it seems to have ground to a halt. I think perhaps this committee ought to be looking at finding ways to be able to encourage those developers in those sort of situations. I don't mean the big developments, but some of the smaller ones, to actually get the work completed. Then we'd have more homes for people to have.
Thank you, Councillor Septo. Point noted. Right, that completes my my report. I don't know whether any member wants to. Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just back on to the letter that we got in reply from Baroness Taylor. I have to say that I read it, and there were a number of things in there that alarmed me. I'll point you to the last paragraph of the first page, where the Baroness gives us one of the reasons for the increase in housing requirement, being the new method strikes a balance between meeting the scale of need across the country and focusing additional growth on those places facing the biggest affordability pressures by more than doubling the affordability multiplier we apply in the method. I've been in the building industry all my life, and this just points to a breathtaking naivety from the government here, because if she thinks for 1 minute that actually increasing the amount of houses that are going to be built is going to lower the prices, the actual effect is going to be the opposite. The reason being why is obviously there's a big demand on land at the moment, so landowners are going to be, through laws of supply and demand, going to be pushing up their prices. We've already had it noted that the amount of building materials that are going to be needed to actually match the requirement that we're being asked to deliver is going to stretch the building supply industry. So again, you're going to get a pressure on supply and demand there. So the prices of the building materials are going to go up. And if you think for 1 minute that the developers are going to reduce their profit level, this is just cloud cuckoo land. So to have one of the reasons being why they reply to us and say that we're actually introducing more building because we want to reduce the prices, it smacks of incredible naivety from the government, which is quite alarming. The other thing is where they're talking about we will get all our infrastructure covered by SIL and S106 agreements. I point you to a planning approval that we gave a few weeks ago in Hockley, the foundry. Because they didn't have affordable housing there, they got under £100,000 awarded on S106. Well, that's not going to go anywhere when it goes to providing affordable housing in the area. So to expect S106 and SIL to reach the level where it's going to give us the infrastructure that we need, again, is naive. And I think that, personally, I think that there is a reason to actually reply to the Baroness's letter, but I'll leave that up to the Leader of the Council to decide on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eaves. Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a bit frustrating, really, because I sit here and I listen to members criticise. You know, it's not my government, it's a Labour government, but I hear them criticise, but I don't hear them coming up with solutions. And Councillor Eaves has just reeled off all the reasons why he personally believes they're wrong, but what does he propose to solve the problem? And I think that he's mentioned about the leader writing another letter, which no doubt will get the same response because this is government policy. We've all lived under different governments with different policies, and we have to suck it up. It's okay, we can write letters, but really we should just get on with the job. And unless Councillor Eaves has got a proposed solution, then I think we're wasting time sat here just talking about it. You know, we need to come up with solutions. We need to work together to propose solutions. I mean, Councillor Steptoe has just brought up about the old police station and what can we do to move it along. He's coming up with an idea. You know, let's increase the supply of housing by trying, looking at the mechanisms for moving those developments along, not letting developers land bank. But we can't just, criticise and all that. We actually need to get our heads together and think about how we're going to move things forward.
Thank you, Councillor Newport. Your point is noted. Thank you. Two more hands. Sorry, Councillor Steptoe. But I think in fairness, I ought to allow Councillor Eaves to come back first.
Thank you, Chair. I think the thing is that where Councillor Newport is misunderstanding the situation is we're being asked by government to over double what is required in the area. I think that is the reason being why we are actually we are questioning their statistics and their reasoning. Is Councillor Newport therefore suggesting that the government statistics are right? I find it quite strange that would be the case. If we're not going to question government on what they're actually asking us to do, then the logical outcome of that is that we accept what they're telling us to do.
Thank you, Councillor Eaves. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. There has been some talk a number of times from various MPs and things at different government levels and different governments about finding ways of getting developers to deliver the houses within a sensible period of time. One of the ideas was that once the permission was granted, if they hadn't done it within a couple of years, they would start to have to pay rates even if the building hadn't been built. So perhaps that's something we ought to be looking at our MPs to be done, because that would have to be legislation that came down from the very top. Until something like that happens, we're never going to be able to push the developers to supply the houses that we do need. But I'd also agree with Councillor Eaves that the numbers that were being suggested are so out of kilt with what we actually do need.
And the reason why these letters appear is to have a certain amount of discussion in terms of response. It is a matter for the leader whether she chooses to respond along the lines that you're suggesting. But I think it's healthy discussion. So thank you for that. But there isn't a formal recommendation, but is my report noted? Thank you very much. Right, we move on to item 7, which is the local development scheme. And I turn to Mr. Quilter to take us through that item, please. Mr. Quilter.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm pleased to introduce the updated local development scheme for Rochford District Council, covering the period of 2025 to 2028. This update reflects the Council's commitment to maintaining a transparent and deliverable programme for preparing the new local plan. The revised timetable has been necessitated by several factors, most notably the significant changes introduced through the updated National Planning Policy Framework in December 2024. These changes, including a revised housing need methodology, have increased Rochford's annual housing requirement from around 360 to 689, with an additional buffer. This has required a fundamental reassessment of our evidence base, including transport, infrastructure, flood risk and viability, to ensure that any growth is appropriately supported. A further key consideration has been the need to update our Greenbelt evidence. The anticipated changes to national guidance, including the introduction of the Greybelt concept, has delayed the commissioning of the new Greenbelt study. Given the scale of growth now required, it is important that we understand the role and function of the Greenbelt across the district before progressing to the next stage of plan making. This work will help guide any future spatial strategy to ensure that it's both justified and sustainable. In addition, following changes to the composition of the Planning Policy Committee early this year, members have undertaken a review of strategic priorities. This has included a renewed focus on accelerating the local plan process in response to speculative development pressures, particularly on Greenbelt land. This review has helped shape the updated timetable and ensure it remains responsive to emerging challenges. The LDS also proposes the reopening of the call for sites process. The last formal window closed in 2018, and while informal submissions have continued, it is now appropriate to refresh this process. Reopening the call for sites will ensure transparency and allow all interested parties to submit land for consideration. It will also help us respond to updated housing and employment needs, address gaps in geographic coverage, and identify more viable and sustainable proposals, including brownfield and previously developed land. A publicity campaign will support this process, and a cut-off date of the end of October 2025 will be advertised to enable timely assessment ahead of the Regulation 18 consultation. The LDS also outlines our approach to the community infrastructure levy. Members previously asked officers to explore whether the SIL charging schedule could be brought forward more quickly. Officers have reviewed this thoroughly and concluded that, due to legal and procedural requirements, it's not feasible to advance SIL ahead of the local plan. The charging schedule must be based on a sound and up-to-date planning framework, and progressing it prematurely could risk misalignment and undermine its legal robustness. Nevertheless, work on SIL will continue in parallel with the local plan, and we are actively exploring external support, including funding and technical assistance from Essex County Council. Finally, the LDS acknowledges the growing interest in neighbourhood planning across the district. While no neighbourhood plans are currently in place, recent parish polls in Hockley and Hawkwell and a motion passed by Rayleigh Town Council indicate a renewed appetite for community-led planning. The Council will continue to monitor progress and provide support where appropriate, recognising the important role that neighbourhood plans can play in shaping local development priorities. In summary, the updated LDS provides a realistic and deliverable framework for plan making, ensuring compliance with statutory requirements, and supports the Council's ambitions for sustainable growth and infrastructure delivery. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Quilter. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chair. Picking up on the SIL issue, it was myself that raised that. I'm pleased to hear that you're looking at to run it alongside of the work we're doing here. But can I ask that we have regular updates to this committee so we know how the work is progressing? Not necessarily every committee, but certainly every other committee, because I think it's going to be important to make sure that that is in place when we hit the decks running with the actual plan in place. We need to keep that right up front, I believe.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe, and it follows on from quite a discussion last meeting, and I'm pleased to see it acknowledged in the report, so thank you for that. Any other members wish to? Councillor Hoy, I think you were marginally first.
Thank you. Sorry, I was trying to find a page number. Just start with a couple of points, and I'll rate one point, and then there's a couple of things I just want to raise. On paragraph 1.26 of the report, 1.26. It's to do with the call for sites to remain open until the end of Regulation 19 consultation scheduled for autumn 2026. I hope it's a typo, but I think if it is a typo, it needs correcting.
Sorry, Councillor Hoy, can you just speak up a little louder?
Sorry, I'm not happy with the microphones. I think they do need to be looked at. To support timely assessment, a cut-off date of the end of October 2025 will be advertised for inclusion in the upcoming site assessment methodology paper, due to be presented to committee in November 2025. So what date should October 25 be? If we've got a cut-off date of October 25 and the paper's not going to be presented until November 25, I'd just like to understand it a bit more. I think it might mean 26. I don't know. Can I have some clarification around that?
Let's deal with that one first, Mr. Quilter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hoy. So what that's referring to is in terms of we are in a position, or any local plan will be in a position whereby sites can be submitted up to the point of Regulation 19, even up to the point before submission of the plan. But what we're clarifying there is that so it will remain open if sites do want to be submitted. However, if a promoter or a landowner wants that site to be considered within the site assessment methodology work, or the assessment work that we're going to be undertaking and coming to committee in November this year, that they would need to submit that site by the end of October this year. However, there is the opportunity for further sites to be submitted after that period, however, with the understanding that they would obviously not be assessed in that process. So there is clearly a transition into that phase of the plan-making process, but ultimately any site can still be submitted at any point before we submit the plan. But we just, in terms of the actual, the assessments we'll be undertaking, they will be undertaken for that in advance of that November committee meeting.
Sorry, I couldn't hear everything you said. I just need a very straightforward answer. We're having a cut-off date at the end of October 2025, but that's not going to be advertised until November 2025. That's what the report is saying to me. So we're telling people that the cut-off date is going to be October 25 in November 2025. Is that what it says? If not, I need a bit more clarification. I think it's not very well worded then. That's how it reads to me.
Why is it not the same level of assessment?
Well, I'm sorry, I just don't agree. I mean, it's quite clear.
So when it's, can I just then have clarification of when the cut-off date is, when we're advertising this out, and when the real date is? Because if we're...
End of November, and it will be brought to the November planning policy meeting. End of October, I beg your pardon. Yeah.
I still don't understand, but...
Yeah, I mean, so...
We're having the paper presented in November 2025.
Yeah,
so what is the October 25 cut-off about then?
Yeah, so that the call for sites, the formal opening of that to allow people to formally submit that will be opened at the end of September, and then the cut-off will be at the end of October for them to have submitted those sites and then for them to be assessed according to the site assessment methodology paper, which will then come to the committee in November 2025. So the cut-off will be the end of October. And as I say, in terms of the call for sites process as a whole, there still will be opportunity for sites to be submitted after that date, however they won't be assessed. Because obviously we have to have cut off.
I think I understand what you're saying now. I don't think it was well worded for me, but maybe for other people. Why isn't in the same paragraph, submissions received after this date will still be considered but may not be subject to the same level of assessment prior to the Regulation 18 consultation in early 2026? Why would it be a different level of assessment, and how would that assessment differ?
It's on the basis that obviously we need to undertake the assessment and the lead-in time to prepare the Regulation 18 consultation, so we won't have the time to be able to assess them in time for that work. So if we do receive any after the end of October, in advance of the Regulation 18 consultation, we will do what we can, but obviously we have to be mindful of the amount of work that's involved in doing that. So there is obviously a clear expectation that's set out to anyone who is submitting those sites that we can't guarantee that that's going to be assessed to that same level. That doesn't mean after the Regulation 18 consultation that we wouldn't undertake that assessment. We still would, but in terms of what we can have ready for early 2026, that's what we're setting out as those timeframes.
What basis of, I'm trying to think of the right word, how are we covering ourselves if we are excluding some but not others if the level of assessment is different? So if we are saying we're assessing some and some get through and some don't, I think we need to understand how they need to be assessed on the same basis, surely, even if it's different to the previous assessment. So how are we making sure that each submission is assessed on the same basis? I mean, how will it differ?
I think ultimately any site that let's think about the end of the process. If we're submitting a plan with sites included as allocations, they clearly all have to be to the same level. But I think what we're trying to differentiate here is what's possible in terms of what we can include in the Regulation 18 consultation. So I think we certainly wouldn't want to make any assumptions if there was a situation of a site being submitted after the end of October. I think it would just be prudent of us to sort of note down that additional sites have been submitted, but there is still further work to be done given the amount of work we'll have to do after that event. So I think anything that we're going to be presenting at a later date, we certainly want to be clear about how they've been considered and whether there's any outstanding work still to be done. But I think we just have to be, in terms of what we're going to be advising anyone who is submitting a site, they're clear on what we're doing, so they understand that if it is after end of October, that there may well be a later date after the Regulation 18 that further assessment work may need to be undertaken. But clearly, I think we need to have some kind of set deadlines to ensure that those submissions are made in a timely manner. That's clearly, obviously, for us to ensure.
Okay, yes, clear. The process would be very clear then. Okay, sorry. And then just coming on to the report itself, it mentions some of the documents which are already in existence, and in landscaping assessments, etc.
Sorry, Councillor Hoy, you're going to have to speak a little closer to the microphone. We just can't hear you. We can't even hear you here.
No, I understand it. I think the microphones are terrible, and I have repeated that many times.
It does help if you put your mouth a bit closer to it, though.
I'll have a bad back then. I'll be very unnatural. We're talking about the things which go in, and I think that the two new ones have been that there's a Rochford-wide design guide, there's a biodiversity net gain, we're talking about going in there, but we've missed out some as well. I do remember the former leader of the Rochford District Residents put forward a proposal that we should be including a solar panel policy on our houses, and that seems to have disappeared. There is a position statement on artificial pitches, which was intended to be included in this as well, but that seems to have been lost. And also, it does mention here about the how this will affect the economy, but from the peer review, we are supposed to be really embedding our economic strategies into this to make sure they do meet. And I don't get the feeling from the report, how it's written, that we're really trying to embed our economic growth strategies or our cultural strategies into this report, particularly around regeneration. It feels like it's a mention, but there's no real work done on it, or the look that there's no real work. And I think it's really important we do that. It's really something which came out very strongly from our peer review, that we should be doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, clearly, with any council corporate priorities or policies, we would need to take into account when we're drafting the policies for the local plan. So certainly, we wouldn't be ignoring those if they're in place. So anything, equally around solar panels, there's broader policies around net zero, climate change sort of themes. We may well indicate some aspects of that. But yeah, what I would say is that we're certainly not going to be ignoring those issues. We need to deal with those in the plan. Obviously, the plan's covering all matters, not just housing numbers, which I know becomes the focus. But certainly on those themes, we'll need to be mindful of not only our own policies and guidance corporately, but in terms of any other aspects of national guidance, any guidance that County Council has provided to us in the past, that we would need to bring that together when we do draft the plan itself. And obviously there will be the opportunity when we bring the Regulation 18 document to this committee in advance of the full council meeting, that will be there to be scrutinised. So we're certainly, and given that the Regulation 18 is early stage preparation of the plan, that we have obviously another step after that. If there are things that are deemed to be lacking or in some shape or form, that we can obviously look at that in terms of any further refinements of policies before we get to the final draft version of the plan itself. So certainly I wouldn't say that we're looking to diminish the importance of those, so we would maintain that.
Thank you. Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few questions on the report that I'd like to pick up on. So, I don't know if this is for Jonathan or for the Director of Place. So, what weight does this document, this LDS, actually carry? And I'll put some context around that question. So, in January, we adopted the LDS. In that LDS that was adopted, 3.11, the preferred options document, public consultation, Reg 18, target date summer 2025. The committees had no update on why that didn't happen. There was no decision taken until tonight, where the members get to decide on a revised plan. So what assurance can residents have that anything that's decided in this committee is actually going to happen, and it's not led by officers determining when they're going to deliver on the plan? And in fact, not just officers, but obviously we appreciate that there could be external factors that delay these plans. But I don't think it really gives confidence around the plan. So that's my first question. Do you want all of my questions at once, or do you want me to go slow?
I think that's a question that Ms Goodings really ought to take as Director of Place,
Yep.
Because she obviously controls the overall, if that's all right.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Newport. Yeah, so it's a requirement to have an LDS, and the LDS has to be regularly updated. So obviously this is a regular update to that, which it's not one of the regular updates, I should say. It's a specific update because the timetable has changed within it. As you know, we have a hard deadline of December 2026 that government has taken. So we are committed as officers to meet those deadlines. We've worked on something in this LDS that we think is realistic and deliverable where we are. There are also risks associated with the local plan, as you've mentioned, in terms of external factors, resource factors, government policy changes again, and we've got all those in our minds when we're putting this together. If there are any further changes to the timetable, then obviously we'll bring them back to the committee to prove, discuss as appropriate. But yeah, we have this deadline of December 26, and this is the timetable that we will be working to meet that. Anything else we'll have to come back to you at committee to decide on.
Thank you very much, Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to just come back on that then. So, I mean, we've got to summer 2025. It's come and gone since January. No update on why it slipped. So what monitoring is in place to make sure we're not slipping? Because this plan, as you well know, and I know, and certainly Councillor Hoy and Steptoe, this just seems like a never-ending nightmare. I mean, I've been sat on planning policy for years now, and when we actually look at the timetable, how long it's taken, the LGA came in for the peer review, said get on with it, and this isn't getting on with it, this is just more delay, and there might be more delay, because I don't think we can provide residents with assurance this is not going to slip again. This is going to slip beyond the reach of this council if LGR goes ahead. I say if because there's still no certainty. So the question is, what monitoring is in place and how is that going to be reported to committee, and how often is it going to be reported so that the public know that we are on schedule?
I think there is an element of ignoring the fact that there has been significant changes to government policy legislation, which has meant the shifting sands over the last sort of 6 months to a year. And I think there's got to be some acceptance that the extraordinary increase in housing targets has meant a bit of a reset on some of the work that has been done in the past, and the calling for additional sites. It's not a totally adequate answer because it frustrates me like hell that this is rolling on and rolling on and rolling on. But to use that awful expression, we are where we are. And we have certainly in this administration said that we want to move this forward so that we are at Reg 18 stage by the turn of the year, and we really do need to move it on. So I don't think we can totally ignore the actual reason that there's been huge changes in government policy, huge demands so that we develop a plan which is compliant, because there's no point in just going on with a plan that, when it is subject to the Reg 19 process, doesn't meet what it's supposed to do. That's the current situation. I don't know whether officers want to add anything to that. There's Goodings.
I was just going to say, in terms of taking the project forward, so we've now got a project manager in place, so that will allow the specialist officers to really concentrate on the planning documents, and the project manager will be coming in, making sure that all those deadlines are met, sitting on the consultants to make sure that those consultants are also meeting their deadlines. So that's one of the things that we've introduced to make sure that we are hitting that project and those deadlines that we've got within the LDS. I was going to mention it later, but we've also got extra committees in, so you'll see there's almost a monthly committee between now and the end of January, which is obviously the big milestone for Regulation 18. So in consultation with the chair, if you want sort of progress updates as part of those committees, we can absolutely do that in a similar way that there was a paper at the last committee, I think, which talked about the progress of the various evidence documents. We can certainly keep bringing that to committee to update members if they would find that helpful.
Thank you. Look, your point is a fair one, notwithstanding my earlier comments, in the sense that we do want to move this along. Your point about the peer review. So your point is well made, Councillor Newport, and officers have certainly made a note. I think somewhere, and I can't immediately turn to it, the word accelerate is in the documentation. We want to get this, we really do want to push on with it. Thank you. You want to move on to your next point?
Yeah, so I welcome what the Director of Police has said about reporting into committee, so I'll look forward to those updates. So the next point, or the next question for officers is, given the groundswell of public support for neighbourhood plans, what impact, at this point, I will declare an interest as a Rayleigh Town Councillor. Sorry, because I missed that part in the report. What impact will this delay or potential impact will that have to the production of those neighbourhood plans? Because as I understand it, if those neighbourhood plans are progressed by parish councils and they seem to be increasing in numbers and desires to do them, that the district council is bound to offer support to those town and parish councils. What impact will that have on resourcing in planning policy and officers? Because in a conversation that I had, email conversation with the Director of Place, she acknowledged that we're not in a good position to offer that support previously. So has that changed? How can residents again be assured that the District Council will be able to give the support to get those neighbourhood plans in place?
Before I ask officers to come back, I'm particularly pleased that you've raised that point because it is topical. And I'm very pleased to see within Appendix A, I made a note here on pages 46, where the heading is, but 47, there is a little bit about neighbourhood plans, because it is important that members of the public and their parish councils understand exactly what neighbourhood plans are seeking to achieve. But I think you've asked a perfectly reasonable question. I'll turn to Ms Goodings again, Director of Place, to help us out with an answer.
Thank you. So just to say that, neighbourhood plans can be done at any time during the local plan process, so you don't need an adopted local plan to then have a neighbourhood plan. A neighbourhood plan can be ahead of a local plan and vice versa. My experience is from start to finish, the minimum time most neighbourhood plans take to produce is around 18 months. So unless they are hugely accelerated, the likelihood is they're on a similar or slightly later timescale than the local plan itself. In terms of resource, yes, the council has a duty to support neighbourhood plans. And that is, as far as the wording goes, a duty to support. So neighbourhood plans are primarily led by the parish or the group that puts the neighbourhood plan together. So they would be responsible for gathering the evidence, for doing much of the informal consultation stages, and for initially drafting their policies and any allocations, etc. So the way that I see our role would be to reviewing and providing guidance and support on, say, policies, mapping, making sure that things are clear. We'd also have to support in terms of sharing our consultation list, for example, when they get to those more formal consultation stages. And then later on, we are then responsible as a district council in terms of taking them through their final examination and then adoption. That process isn't as stringent as a local plan, so that is done normally through written representations. So there is absolutely work to do for the team in doing those, and if all 10 came forward on a similar timescale, then we would have to consider how we resourced that. But we're speaking to the parishes. We'll have the first opportunity parishes need to come forward is through officially delegating their area. Once we've got any of those submissions in. We'd really want to work with them on what's your timetable, so that then we can look at resourcing of the likely points that they will need support from us. Unfortunately, there was government funding that supported both the district council and the neighbourhood plan groups to produce neighbourhood plans, which we would have used to help support. Unfortunately, that has been discontinued for the next financial year, so it would be something that, as this council, we would have to fund directly. So it may be something that through budget setting we may want to put a reserve or some other funding aside potentially to help support those neighbourhood plans come forward.
Thank you. On that point, obviously parish town councils aren't planning authorities in themselves, and I think it would be helpful if we took on some sort of briefing process to actually help parishes and town councils understand exactly what a neighbourhood plan is. So there's a sort of balance, so parish and town councils are able to make an informed decision on how to proceed. So I think there's a bit of work to do to brief, pull the town and the parish councils together. I don't know whether members, I'm not getting a nod on that particularly, but Councillor Steptoe.
Chairman, can I just make a suggestion on that point? It seems to me that if we're going to be briefing the parish councils, that would be an ideal thing to take it through the Rochford 100 Association of Local Councils. They're well placed to actually to be able to organise that and be able to talk to the parishes all at the same time.
Yeah, I totally agree. That is the constituted body through which we would channel. But I think some briefing work needs to take place so that neighbourhood plans are fully understood in terms of what they do, what the impact is on the community, what the cost is, because my understanding is that the cost has to be borne by the community because, as you say, there's no funding, no direct funding from government on it. I think, was it the Localism Act 2011 that introduced them? That was government-led, and then they take your feet beneath your legs by not doing any funding. But certainly I think we could play a facilitation role towards the parish councils, and obviously the Rochford 100 Association of Local Councils is the body to do it. Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Right, Councillor Newport, are we nearing the end of your questions?
Yeah, the night's only just begun, Chairman. So,
sorry?
The night has only just begun. So I just wanted to come back on what you were just saying about the Rochford 100. I think I would caution that that's a membership body, not necessarily all parish and town councils are members, or they may be considering their membership in the future. So I don't think that's the appropriate body myself personally. I think that, again, as you will know, with the LGR briefings, that hasn't been taken through that body, probably for that reason as well. So anyway, I'll just move on to my my last.
The point is, Councillor Newport, we're all in agreement that some briefing needs to take
absolutely.
place. How that briefing takes place, I think, is a bit immaterial. I think we're all committed to
I
to
agree.
briefing.
Yeah. As
So
I've said,
let's move on.
Support that. So my last point, Chairman, on this report is that, as I said earlier, we need to get on. The peer review said to us we need to get on with the local plan. I don't think there's sufficient assurance in this document that this local plan will get delivered before LGR, and I'm very concerned about. I remember sitting in Swain Park School with Councillor Steptoe, with Councillor Hoy, talking about the traffic assessment, independent traffic assessment, and we've yet to see it. And that was years ago. And I know things have changed, government policies changed, they've had to rework some of the things, but I think that these issues, such as that's just one piece of evidence, I think there's a huge risk, and I can't see this coming to fruition before LGR, this local plan. I don't have confidence in it.
Well, I think in fairness on that point, a number of the dates that are mentioned actually coincide with when LGR is supposed to be delivered. But we really have got to push ahead with business as usual. And there's
and that's why I don't think that we should be amending the timetable from what was adopted, agreed in January. In January, Councillor Belton was in the paper criticising our administration for kicking it down the road. But here it is, here's the headline. She's in the paper saying, oh, they're kicking it down the road to LGR. I don't want to kick it down the road to LGR. I want to get on and deliver it now. So I personally won't be supporting the recommendation to adopt this, because I think we should keep with the original timetable and stick to it, because we will then hopefully deliver it before LGR. There's no certainty because of those risks that I've previously mentioned, and I think we all know there's risks in this and projects, but I won't be supporting to amend the timetable further to kick it down the road. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Newport. Councillor Steptoe, you've been waiting patiently.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. A couple of points to raise. But first of all, just with regards to the Rochford 100, as far as I'm aware, all the parish councils are members. If they're not, by having a briefing, that would certainly give them incentive to join the Rochford 100. So I'd leave that there. I was going to raise some questions around paragraph 1.26, but Councillor Hoy has nicked some of my thunder. I understand the dates, that the cut-off date is the end of October, and reporting back to us by November 25. Not a problem with that. My concern is, and I felt the answer that the officer gave was not strong enough. The cut-off date should be a cut-off date, end of. If a developer comes in the middle of December and says, oh, I want to be included on this, I think that's unfair on every other developer that might come forward later. And I think that would leave us open to adjudication. I can remember far enough back that it was like with the last core strategy, where we had actually 2 challenges on judicial reviews because we hadn't included them in our allocations. So I am very concerned, and I do feel that this committee has the power to instruct the officer to say the cut-off date is the last day in October, end of. If it comes in after that, sorry, you haven't met the cut-off date. And I think this committee really does need to consider and actually put that in place.
Thank you. And you made that point fairly forcefully, but it amplifies Councillor Hoy's point. I do agree with you that there needs to be some precision, because it's a little unfair on those people that do comply with the deadline, and then other people that sort of think, oh, well, we've still got an opportunity to get it in. It doesn't make it too clear. So I think, Councillor Hoy, I think I heard you just say, Councillor Newport, you agree as well?
I absolutely agree, and I think R2 could be amended to reflect that.
Yeah, okay.
I think Councillor Steptoe makes a good point.
I'm happy to make that formal proposition, Chairman.
Okay, all right. Councillor Reeves. Right. So we're at a point where we need some wording, I think.
So there is a legal issue. So you could cut off in October to say we won't consider it in Reg 18, but we are required to consider all reasonable alternatives, which includes anything that's been submitted to us later. So there's a legal issue in that we are required to consider all reasonable alternatives regardless of when they are submitted in the process. So we could put a cut-off that said if you don't get it by the end of October, you don't get it in the Reg 18, but anything that comes through the Reg 18 consultation, we will have to consider prior to the next consultation, because otherwise we will fail on the sustainability appraisal and at examination.
Certainly, Councillor Steptoe.
Just to clarify, if somebody came forward with a proposition, I don't know, January, February of next year, you would still have to include it?
We would still have to show that we'd considered it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big difference between consider and include. So
Yeah,
I'll stand
yeah.
by what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, from what I understand with the last comment, we move into a legal area. And, of course, the power of this committee doesn't allow us to change the legalities of it. So we are in some difficulty. I think, there's general consensus. We all agree with the point that is being made. It somehow seems unfair that someone can drag their heels and then make a submission after the cut-off time. But I'm not sure we can actually make a recommendation. Let Councillor Steptoe just come back.
Thank you, Chairman. We've already sat here and discussed about delay. I think if that's the case, somebody comes in January, February, yet another delay. So I think we need to be firm. Okay, if it means we are challenge the law, but we're still working within the spirit of it, I don't have an issue with that.
Yeah, well, my understanding is that we would still push on with the timetable. As
Yeah, so I think what we were going to suggest maybe is a recommendation for you around the Regulation 18, but also you could recommend that we get legal advice on this matter just to be crystal clear on it, so you can be clear legally what we can and can't do. And then that also gives us protection then, which will provide us advice if we get to the examination. Because the worst thing we want to do is get to the examination and then not make it through the examination, because then everything has been wasted. So,
okay. I mean, you're sensing members' frustration that we want to get on with this and we don't want to find reasons to delay it. I think that's the general consensus. And I think we're there's unity in that. We really do want to move it along. Councillor Newport, you put your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was just going to pick up on the point where you said we can't make a legal decision, and I beg to differ, because numerous times I've heard legal advice given and members have totally ignored it. So I think that there is and I'm not saying that we do that, absolutely not, because but I'm absolutely with Councillor Steptoe here. But I do go with the professional advice, is that, yeah, perhaps we should get legal advice on it, and then come back on that recommendation, perhaps on the call for sites, and when we're going to cut that off. There's still time. I think the Director of Place said there's going to be another meeting shortly as well of planning policy, so there's time to put that recommendation in anyway, and that cut-off date after we've taken that advice and considered the advice. But I am absolutely with Councillor Steptoe, is that there needs to be a definitive end date to it,
Well,
not just
yeah.
just a floating, date where we can have developers turn up and say, "Oh, here we go, here's another load of work for you," because it takes their fancy. So yeah,
Yeah, I think we're in danger of overemphasising the point. We agree, but we've got to also be legally compliant. So some legal advice, guidance does need to be sought. Guidance doesn't necessarily, but you sum up the guidance. Is it guidance or is it actual law? But we need some further legal guidance on that. Councillor Steptoe, I feel you itching on the button of your microphone.
Only to say, Chairman, that sometimes legal advice could be very ambiguous in the best of times. That's been my experience through many things. Yes, I'm very concerned about leaving the council open to any form of judicial review, so I don't have a problem with the taking some legal advice. But I still think we need to say, when we're sending out the invitation, that it is a cut-off date, it's definitive, but we need to get that publicity out, we need to get that information out to the potential sites in the meantime. Okay. Because if we delay that for another couple of weeks, we're going to have to move the deadline just that bit further down the road.
Right, okay. I think we're there. I mean, we need some definitive legal advice unambiguous legal advice, so that it actually assists us rather than just gives us options and it doesn't take us forward. We really need some weighted legal advice, not just sort of stuff that says on one hand if you do this and on the other hand. We need to know where we stand. So just to make that point, is that all right? And that will be included within the minutes. Right, can we move on, please? Any other points on agenda item 7? Councillor Hoy, I'm being very generous tonight.
I know you're very
Everyone
generous.
keep
Thank you
coming
very much.
back.
Sorry, I, in conversations I've had with other people, I thought someone else was going to raise this, but as they haven't, I thought I'd just very quickly raise this. So it's under the risks in the report.
Yep.
In the report on page 11 and 12. And it may be a difficult one for officers to actually write about, but as a politician, it's easy for me to talk about. Is that there doesn't seem to be consideration of the risk of elections next year, because obviously previously we had a slim majority. This year the administration has a slim majority, and any elections could affect that and could be very detrimental to whoever is doing the local plan. So I'm just wondering why that the elections aren't considered a risk.
Any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously in terms of the whole local plan process, we know that it is very much tied into that political cycle. So certainly, yeah, I mean, obviously as officers we have to be careful in terms of anything that we're writing in respect of the politics. But yeah, maybe something high level to that extent we can reflect on. Yeah, if that's desired, we can have a think about that in terms of any additional risks around that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm being careful what I'm saying really, but I suppose in terms of actually what we were trying to reflect the nature of the decision-making process. Really, I think that's my understanding anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair risk. It is a fair risk. There must be a set of words that don't cause difficulty. All right, but it's a fair point, very fair point. Thank you, Councillor Reeves.
Thank you. My understanding on the LGR briefing the other night was that the expectation at the moment is there isn't going to be elections.
So I'm going to have to ask you to speak a bit closer.
Sorry. Following the LGR briefing the other night, unless I misunderstood, I think the expectation is that there won't be elections next year. I know that that's an expectation, so I get it could be still a risk. I understand that. The other thing I was going to ask as well was, I've disappeared. It would help members, I think, quite considerably if we could have an update on what call for sites are actually on our list at the moment, because I'm sure that's changed from the last time that we were notified. And I think that would be very helpful for us to have.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly, obviously, the end result of that process that we're proposing to take that paper in November, that'll obviously, clearly, that process will include any further sites that we've received in the interim. As we mentioned, obviously, the last formal stage was 2018. There's been the 2021 consultation, but outside of those processes, we have received some sites. The information that's currently on the website was obviously dated on the 2021 consultation, so that does give the list as of that period of time. And certainly in terms of if there is a requirement we can provide those lists at the appropriate times. Obviously we need to compile that information. We've got those lists in the background, but just to compile it for publication effectively.
Right, I want to bring this item, but I realise that Councillor Marriott, who's a visiting member, also put up her hand a moment ago, and I did mean to include you. I think you possibly want to make a comment in relation to the neighbourhood plans, didn't you? And that may help our understanding. So, Councillor Marriott.
Firstly, Councillor Steptoe has already raised what I was going to say, but I'd like to confirm that all 14 parishes are in fact members of Rochford 100. The parishes are talking amongst themselves on the subject. There has been an approach to the leader of this council from Hawkwell Parish so that to involve RDC in discussions about a briefing, and also getting information out to members of the public as well, because although it's very well intended, information that puts that goes out through social media can sometimes end up with people putting their various slants on things. So the idea is to try and put together a meeting where you've got more than one expert that we're currently looking into finding, so that anybody, both the parishes and the public, can listen to what people have got to, the people that have got experience in these matters have got to say, and form their own views as to what the way forward is.
Thank you.
But that's ongoing discussions in the background at the moment. I hope that helps, and thank you for indulging me, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I think the real message is there needs to be some communication, some constructive briefing through one means or another, and really the obligation, I think, falls on this authority to do that, or to ensure that it is done, and be supportive of it. I think that's the least we can do as a planning authority to help parishes and the town council, as it is an issue to which members of the public are being made aware of, and I think it would just help them. But if we come back now, if I may, to the recommendations in the item 7, we'll now vote on them by means of a show of hands, if that's all right. Councillor Steptoe. No, I don't think you're talking in relation to the legalities, the time.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we actually, I'll take some guidance, but I don't think we're at the specific recommendations, provided we've got it in the minutes, that we want to check the legalities of it. I wouldn't have thought there's a need for a change in the recommendation. If there is, I do want to move things along because we got other things, but is there really a need to change the recommendation based on the discussion? I'm seeing hands all over the place. Adrian Eves, Councillor Eves, sorry.
Thank you. Can I suggest that just a simple addition to the end?
You're going to have to put your mouth closer to that microphone.
So, my mic has been turned down. I don't know why, but I'm going to end up eating this thing in a minute. Could I make a suggestion that we just put a simple addition on the end of R2, subject to legal confirmation on cut-off date.
Happy with that? Happy?
I think it just deals with our concerns, that's all.
Right. So, if we may, we'll take recommendation 1 first. Sorry. I think I had a seconder. I looked across at Councillor Newport. Were you seconding that? Sorry, Councillor Newport. R2, the additional word. I was going to come to that point in a moment, but let's take recommendation 1 first. That the Planning Policy Committee approves the Local Development Scheme 2025 to 2028 as set out in Appendix A. Can I have a show of hands of those in favour, please? And those against? And obviously no abstentions as everyone has voted. Now, there's been a proposal on R2 that we add the words at the end, and I'll read the whole thing out in a moment, but we add the words that are in front of us. Specifically, it's a proposal by Councillor Eaves, subject to legal confirmation on cut-off dates. Councillor Eaves, you're proposing that addition to that recommendation. And I've got a seconder, I think, Councillor Newport. Yep, Councillor Newport, that's good. So I'll now read out the recommendation in full that the Planning Policy Committee approves the reopening of the call for sites process at the earliest opportunity to ensure a transparent and comprehensive approach to identifying potential growth options subject to legal confirmation on cut-off dates. Can I have a show of hands of those in favour of that recommendation, please? And that is unanimous. Thank you, members. Right, we move on to item 8, which is the response to Southend-on-Sea Council's 2025 new local plan and their preferred approach. Mr. Kudler, you're going to take us through it.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. So I'm presenting Rochford District Council's proposed response to Southend City Council's Regulation 18 consultation on their emerging local plan, termed specifically the preferred approach with options document. This report is currently at the Regulation 18 stage, which is an earlier stage than the next item, response to Castle Point, meaning there is still opportunity for stakeholders to influence the direction of this plan. This consultation represents a significant milestone in Southend's plan-making process, sets out their spatial strategy, strategic policies and development management framework to guide growth through to 2040. As a neighbouring authority and a prescribed body under duty to cooperate, Rochford District Council has a clear interest in the outcomes of this plan, given the close geographic, economic and infrastructure ties between our districts. Our response, which we're seeking member endorsement for today, focuses on several key areas of strategic importance, which I'll briefly summarise. Firstly, looking at housing need and spatial strategy. In paragraph 1.4 of the committee report, we set out our concern at Southend's proposed housing target over the planned period of 9,500 dwellings, which not including the separate option 3B. This falls significantly short of the city's assessed need assigned by national government, which would exceed 20,000 dwellings. This shortfall of over 11,000 homes could have direct implications for Rochford, including increased pressure on our housing supply, greenbelt land and local infrastructure. We therefore recommend that Southend City Council seriously consider their proposed option for a new neighbourhood to the north of the city, an area which could deliver housing at scale alongside strategic infrastructure improvements. To not do this would place considerably greater pressure on Rochford District. Secondly, on infrastructure delivery, while we welcome the document's principle of infrastructure-led growth, the current plan lacks clarity on how infrastructure will be funded, delivered and coordinated, particularly across administrative boundaries. Much of the housing numbers the document does propose are on brownfield urban sites, which are unlikely to yield much in the way of infrastructure contribution due to the land values and high development costs of doing so on such sites. We emphasise the need for sustained cross-boundary dialogue and robust evidence, including transport modelling and viability assessments, to ensure that infrastructure provision is not only aspirational, but also achievable. The consultation has a section on strategic policy option 3B. This is the proposed new neighbourhood to the north of Southend. This is a pivotal element of consultation. The land in question, currently designated as Greenbelt, presents an opportunity to deliver well-planned infrastructure supported community within the city's boundaries. Our response recommends Southend to give this option serious consideration, given the scale of their housing shortfall. We note similar land parcels are being promoted on the Rochford side of the boundary by the same developer. We must stress that no decisions have been made on this. However, any future consideration would require a coordinated joint master planning approach to maximise infrastructure delivery. Another area of concern would be transport and connectivity. We've highlighted the lack of publicly available transport evidence, particularly the full transport assessment, which has not been published alongside the consultation document. This would be critical to understanding the impact of growth on both Southend and Rochford's road networks. We support proposals for sustainable transport and recommend alignment with Essex County Council's emerging local transport plan and Rochford's own emerging local cycling walking infrastructure plan. On the economic development aspects, we support Southend's strategy and advocate for continued collaboration, particularly around employment, land provision, and the future role of London Southend Airport and the Airport Business Park. On environment and climate change, also central to our response, we recommend strengthening policies around green infrastructure, biodiversity and climate resilience. We support a coordinated approach to climate adaptation across South Essex. Another area we would encourage Southend to go further on is design and density. We support high quality design and efficient land use within the Southend boundaries, suggest exploring opportunities for increased density in some of the lower density urban areas to reduce pressure on the green belt and improve access to services. On the duty to cooperate, we acknowledge Southend's engagement with us to date, but stress the importance of continued and meaningful collaboration. We recommend the preparation of a joint statement of common ground to support submission of their local plan. And just to note, we've prepared this response in time for a presentation at this committee session. However, the deadline for consultation comments to be submitted to Southend City Council is the 30th of September, which does give us a bit more time. We therefore recommend that members endorse a proposed response and delegate authority to Director of Place in consultation with the lead member for strategic planning to make further minor amendments prior to submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kudler. Any microphones are getting softer, aren't they? Any particular comments, Councillor Steptoe?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I do have some great deal of difficulty in supporting Southend's emerging plan, particularly a way I'm fully aware with my fellow ward councillor that they've got a planning application sitting before them where they're looking to build a 5-storey block of housing right up against our border, and I mean right up against it, with on greenfield sites. I'm struggling very hard to support any of Southend's emerging strategy. I think it's going to have a great deal of effect on us going forward right across the whole of our southern border.
Thank you. I think the letter makes that point fairly clear, doesn't it, in a number of areas. The letter is a bit difficult because you're constantly toggling between the policy and the response. So the summary that has been provided us tonight and the detail in the first part of the report is easier to understand. But are there particular points within those paragraphs, and I think we're really talking about the start of the report 1.1 right through to the summary of 1.23, are there any specifics that you really do have an issue with?
Chairman, it's very difficult to say that because it's the whole situation with the whole core strategy. And I do appreciate the officers got to respond in the manner that they have. If it had been left to me, I'd have got it into one sentence.
Very nicely put. Councillor Newport, I think you were next, and then Councillor Eaves.
Thanks, Chairman. Just for clarity, the strategic option 3B new neighbourhood north of Southend, is that the Bournes Green? I don't know what that means. North of Southend, where is that?
Correct, yes. So what they're calling option 3B, new neighbourhood north Southend, is focused on that land around Bournes Green.
Right, okay. So, and sorry, if just for clarity then, so if Southend took that strategic policy option 3B and built however many houses there, would they meet their housing target, or would they then put pressure on RDC in the duty to cooperate in using the adjacent land on the border? That's the question, really, because, I mean, some of the committee withdrew the expression of interest, and this kind of feels like they're going back with potentially green lighting what Southend are doing, and there is creep, from Southend, because they just haven't got the land, have they? So, and I think that's the fear that has been widely publicised by certain members. So I just need clarity on that.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Newport. So the clearly, obviously, this is a Regulation 18 document, so it's not the final version of their plan. So I think I would reiterate that, and I think also in terms of equally on that in our plan going forwards, we need to still explore the options, which is obviously what Southend are also doing in this document. So they've not committed to that site in this document so far. There is more work to be done for them. If they were to include that land, they would not be meeting their needs. Their need is significant. Obviously, they've been affected by the the higher standard method figures that the government's issued, in the same way that we have. The unmet need that would arise from Southend based on this current approach would be significant. I think we're very careful in terms of what we're responding with to say that we're not able to take that unmet need. Clearly, we've got our own issues to manage growth, and we've got to deal with that for our own local plan and our own evidence. But certainly for us in engaging with Southend, we need to engage with them, obviously at an officer level and through the duty to cooperate. We need to make sure that we've shown that we've had that proactive engagement, both for the preparation of our plan, and obviously they need to do it for their plan as well. So certainly we'll be ensuring that. But from the point of view of where we are at this stage, we clearly want to outline the principal concern around the not meeting needs, and obviously that any unmet need would not be expected to be picked up in Rochford. So that's certainly a key point to highlight.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Quilter. Councillor Newport, you make a very good point. There is no intention to have some creep, but whether or not, I look at paragraph 1.4, 20,500, I think if my maths is correct, is their target, and yet they're going in with 9,500. So it does beg the question, where do they intend to deliver the other 11,000? And one is led to a conclusion with the possibility of LGR around the corner and the possibility of unitarisation, that they can fulfil that delivery in a new unitary authority. That is the conclusion that I come to on that point. Irrespective of all the other things to do with LGR, it is simply about a new unitary authority being able to deliver their housing numbers in addition to our own very stretching targets. And that point alone concerns me. It would be an absolute disaster. And I can't find words quite strong enough this evening to say to officers, we really do need to be leaving them in absolutely no doubt that we do not intend to support any surplus housing that they're unable to deliver. They must have their own. We want to cooperate. We have an obligation, legal obligation, to have a duty to cooperate, but that mustn't be construed as us being complicit and agreeing to the fact that, because as soon as you see paragraph 1.4, there's a natural point from a Southend point of view to say, yes, well, you just signed off on the letter that you always knew that we got another 11,000 properties to deliver. It was implicit and complicit in what you said that it would be delivered in, this new unitary authority we want to have with you, because you've got the land we haven't. So I think officers have got to, I get a little excited at these points, and I might need to be calmed by members if you have a different view, but I think we need to be as strong as we can reasonably be by responding. Councillor Newport, before I go any further.
Yeah. Thanks, Chairman. And I think we're all equally concerned. Although I will challenge the point that LGR doesn't make the duty to cooperate go away, even if we were in an authority with them, or whoever we end up with as the government determines. And also, I think that what members may be missing is strategic planning will be a role of the mayor. So the mayor will ultimately decide where. So that's why we need to get on with it and decide where our housing goes now, rather than leaving it to the mayor to tell us. As it stands, this response to Southend, I think you've said about it being strong. I don't think it's strong enough. I won't be supporting this response to go in to Southend. I think, to be honest, I think this does kind of say, yeah, it's okay, you could build loads of houses there, but as long as it's not in our backyard, I think, and it still presents the same problem. It still puts pressure on the infrastructure that our residents have to use. The hospital, the roads, it's not solving any of those issues. And as it stands, we're not addressing that. And we need to address that. And how we address that is the challenge. We all know the challenge exists. We had the challenge in our administration. You've got it in your administration. Yep. We need to look at how we work together to solve the challenge on the housing numbers. And I truly believe that we do need to work together as a council, as a whole council. I think Councillor Hoy's rightly said about the political risk, and I think that's not just internally, but externally. We're facing threats from Reform or whoever. I think we just get on with it and get it done for our residents and deliver for them. So that's it, really. So I agree with you, and I think, but this response needs to be stronger.
Yeah.
And we need to be clearer.
Nope. Okay. Well, that's good to hear. Councillor Steptoe.
Yes, some questions and clarification, please, Chair. You said that our response needs to be in by mid-September, does that you say?
30th. End of September, the 30th.
September, thank you. What is the implications if we don't agree with this recommendation? What is the implications?
If you don't agree and we have to make major changes, there probably won't be time to take it back to committee prior to the cut-off date. Because the next scheduled committee is in October.
So, what are you saying? Are you saying that we've got to accept it? Or if we don't accept it, then we don't give any response at all? I don't understand what the implication is going to be.
So what we're saying is it's a committee decision to submit something. If you don't want to submit this response, ideally committee should be considering an alternative response, and the next opportunity you'd have to do that would be in October, which is beyond their consultation end date. Now, we could ask them if they would accept something later. They could say yes, they could say no. Or you could specify specific changes now and delegate approval, potentially, I think, if Jackie thinks that's okay, to myself in consultation with the chairman, for example. Or we could just not approve this and not send anything. That's obviously the sort of more nuclear option.
When has Southend got to put their report into the inspector? When's that due?
So this is only Reg 18 consultation, so they've got, in the same way that we have, they're working to the December 26 deadline.
So I couldn't hear what...
They're working to the December 26 deadline, the same as us, so they're, they've got some time.
It's the same deadline?
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Reeves.
Thank you. Reading the report, I was actually quite pleased to see a number of red lines in there. I understand the concerns of members, though, and if we can strengthen this reply, then great. But recommendation 2 does actually give us an option to be able to do that by delegating authority to the Director of Place. So I would suggest that that would be a healthy way for us to actually be constructively critical on this and put suggestions through to the Director of Place, who, if we accept these recommendations, will have the authority to update and strengthen in the manner that we have actually mentioned tonight. But I think it needs member input to actually converse with the Director of Place to make that happen. There's no point in just saying we can't send this as it is. we have to be constructive. To not send a reply is not an option.
Councillor Newport.
Just quickly, Chairman, I don't actually agree with Councillor Eaves. I think the Director of Place, when she's used delegated powers in the past, members have been really critical of her, and I think it's been really unfair. So I don't want to push responsibility onto the Director of Place. I'll be happy to attend another meeting. You could call another meeting in that period if this is important enough, and I think it is important enough that we put forward that robust response. So if you agree with officers to call another meeting, I'll turn up to the meeting. So I'll leave that with you.
The difficulty we have, and I'll bring you in a moment, Councillor Steptoe, the difficulty is you can't write any letter like this by committee. It just doesn't work. And, you know, if you bring back another letter and you have... I think the best bit of this is the report, actually, rather than the letter, because it's quite difficult to see the policy, because it just refers to a policy S, whatever it is, with a reply. So we have to trust that you've teased out all the particular points. So I think you're getting a very clear message. I personally think it would be impolite not to respond, because I think that produces a default situation where they haven't responded, so they don't care, so we just go ahead. I think that's my view. So I think we should respond. It's how we deal with it, because I can just see whatever wording is used, people have their own interpretation on wording. I think we're giving a general measure that we feel very uneasy, but I don't think we're ever going to... I think we could have as many versions and we could be sitting here for many nights, so we don't agree with that version. I don't have a problem with having another meeting, but I don't think it would achieve much if I'm very truthful with you. I don't want to put people in a difficult position of not agreeing with them, but I wouldn't have thought that it would be too unreasonable for members of this committee to go back to the Director of Place with their specific concerns in areas so that a letter can be constructed. I think it's a bit unfair to just expect officers, if we have concerns as members on specific points, I think we need to feed those points in within the next, really by the end of this week, directly to the Director of Place. Is that a fair approach? So that those can be taken account of in the final letter. But ultimately, it is officers that produces work on behalf of members to reflect our feelings. So just before I ask you for an answer on that, let's listen to Councillor Steptoe, and then anyone else when we come back.
Thanks, Chairman. Just as a thought, it'll be interesting to know how Southend will respond to the other way around. So that would be quite an interesting thing going the other way. One of the areas that I would like to see more robust comment on is particularly on Bournes Green, and again on the Fossett's Farm area, where the developments are going to be right up against the border. It will, in some cases, amalgamate parts of Bournes Green into Great Wakering. So there needs to be a green space between the two developments. So it's those sorts of things that I have a big problem with.
Right, Ms. Goodings, do you want to come back on trying to pull this together for us?
Yeah, so I think what I was going to say is if there are a couple of key areas that you definitely want to be changed or strengthened, then that could be written into the recommendation, approval subject to further strengthening of the wording around infrastructure and whatever. That would give the recommendation the coverage that it is taking. It is clear what members' views are. The other alternative, as we've said, is to ask Southend if they would extend, and we can bring it back to the next committee again, but with that guidance from you. The other option, in addition to this, don't forget that as members of the public and as ward members, you can and may wish to make your own representations to the plan on specific, if there are small ward issues and other things that you want to raise. I would certainly encourage members to do that as well, separately, if you wanted to, as well as this response. But I suppose it's, if you've got some key areas that you want to look at, and we can be comfortable with the recommendation, I think we perhaps don't need to bring it back to committee. If you actually are not quite sure yet and you want to have a bit of a think about it and come back to me, then that probably is something that needs to come back to committee, because I'd need to be happy that you were all happy with, some of the changes that we were making.
Thank you. I think it is for members to make their submissions on specific points. I don't really see a way round it. Otherwise, we'd just be debating, sitting here, and as I say, writing a letter by committee becomes impossible, and then it's got to be legally compliant. It is the Reg 18 stage. We need to bear that in mind. But I think you've picked up the feeling in the meeting tonight, so we support the strongest possible representation. But I don't quite, if I'm honest with you, I don't quite know how to take it forward, because any wording is going to be difficult. Councillor Hoy, help me.
So I don't think I'm going to be at all helpful. Perhaps in future we might use working groups or members' briefings to cover these. Something like this. I mean, I had 2 days to read this letter because I was away on a course at the weekend, so it doesn't really give us much time, and I think it's something that perhaps if we have a members' briefing on it in future, I know it doesn't help us today, but in future if we have members' briefings on these beforehand, I think that could be taken care of, and that during the meeting we would have covered a lot of these points. It's just for the future, I know, not helping tonight.
Well, we've got a recommendation, or we've got 2 recommendations down there. Are you able to give us any further guidance?
Picking up on the points of things like infrastructure and building right up against I can't give better words, I'm sure there's a better phrase for covering that. I think if we added that in, the officers need to take that into account and strengthen that part, that would certainly help my particular concerns. But I think generally speaking, across the board, I think we are very concerned about what is very often used as mission creep, where it gradually develops. I think that's probably what Councillor Hoy is saying, that mission creep is a worry.
So are you suggesting an amendment to the recommendations, or what? I'm not quite with you, Councillor Steptoe.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the exact words. I'm struggling with the words a little bit, but certainly along the lines, I think we need to strengthen that we say more about the infrastructure and the lack of it within their plan. Certainly from what I've seen on their applications that are coming forward and we're dealing with. And again, demarcation, I think is probably the better word, between various areas of housing.
Could I perhaps suggest then, recommendation 2, perhaps change to that members delegate authority to the Director of Place in consultation with the Chairman of the Planning Policy Committee to make amendments to the response to reflect the discussion at committee?
Yeah, I was certainly looking to remove the word minor, because we're not necessarily, depends. I would be happy with that as a recommendation, to remove the word minor. Can you just add what was a bit at the end? To the response prior to submission
So I was going to change that last bit. So so members delegate authority to the Director of Place in consultation with the Chairman of the Planning Policy Committee to make any necessary amendments to the response to reflect the discussion at committee, or words to that effect.
Okay. Well, I've taken it a stage further, and what I'm suggesting, I will read the whole thing and see whether or not I get support. That members delegate authority to the Director of Place in consultation with the Chairman of the Planning Policy Committee to make any necessary amendments to the response prior to submission to reflect discussion at committee and the strong representation. Yeah? Have I got a seconder? Councillor Steptoe, thank you. I'm proposing it. So we just need to, if we finish the debate on the item, yeah, we'll take recommendation 1 first. Return to the recommendations, and I'll deal with this by a show of hands. That a formal response, as set out in Appendix A, is submitted to Southend-on-Sea's Regulation 18 consultation within the prescribed time period. So that's just a statement of fact. Can I have a show of hands in support of that? Four. Those against? Not quite sure what the alternative is, but right, okay. 2 against. I think in fairness to that recommendation, you really ought to be, in your debate, supported it with what alternative you suggest, rather than just vote against it, because you talked about how we materially move for things forward. That doesn't move it forward. But anyway, you voted. In R2, and I made a proposal, I had a seconder, so I'll read it for a second time. That members delegate authority to the Director of Place in consultation with the Chairman of the Planning Policy Committee to make any necessary amendments to the response prior to submission to reflect discussion at committee and strong representation. Can I have a show of hands in favour of that, please? 4. And those against? 1. And any abstentions? 1. Okay, thank you. Right, we move on to item 9, which is a Regulation 19. Councillor Williams, would you like us to have a short adjournment? Shall we have a... Yeah. Can we adjourn for just 5 minutes? Because I wouldn't like Councillor Williams to miss out on the debate, so we'd have a short adjournment for just 5 minutes, all right? Okay, members, thank you for that, and we reconvene at 21:16. Right, we move on to agenda item 9, but before we do, and I'm just conscious I don't want to constrain debate, we've been going for nearly 2 hours, so the meeting has lasted approximately nearly 2 hours. I would like to move a motion without notice in line with Committee Procedure Rule 9N, and that is to extend this meeting for as long as necessary in order to complete the business. I do need a seconder for that, please, Councillor Steptoe. And if I can ask for those in favour, please. And those against? And that's 4-2, so we will carry on, but I am mindful, despite the agreement to extend, that we have...
Sorry, Chairman, I understand that's been extended, but I will give my apologies and I will have to leave at 9:30.
Okay.
Due to personal circumstances.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy, and we understand that. Right, we move on to item 9, which is the response to Castle Point Plan 2026 to 2043, and this is a Regulation 19 draft. So I turn to, I think, Mr. Quilter on this one to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I think just to sort of begin, I appreciate we've just debated an item that was in relation to Southend's Regulation 18 consultation, but this is different, whereby it's Castle Point Borough Council's Regulation 19 consultation. I do understand that's planning terminology. So just to assist on that, to just sort of give a brief overview of what the differences are. So Regulation 18 consultation, as I said, of Southend's document, represents an early stage consultation to gather views on the scope, issues and potential options for the local plan, whereby Regulation 19 is a formal consultation on the final draft local plan before submission for examination. In respect to Regulation 18, it's a non-statutory in terms of legal compliance on soundness, more exploratory and flexible. By comparison, the Regulation 19 is statutory stage, requiring representations on legal compliance and soundness as defined by the National Planning Policy Framework. And last point in terms of Regulation 18, the stakeholder input helps shape the direction of the plan before it's finalised, whereby for Regulation 19, responses must address whether the plan is positively prepared, justified, effective and consistent with national policy. I hope that helps, but happy to obviously answer questions once I've finished the introduction to the item. Thank you everyone. In terms of this item seeks approval for Rochford District Council's formal response to Castle Point Borough Council's Regulation 19 consultation on its emerging local plan covering the period 2026 to 2043. As a neighbouring authority, Rochford has a statutory duty to engage constructively on strategic cross-boundary matters. The proposed response included at Appendix A reflects our ongoing commitment to cooperation while safeguarding the interests of our district. While the response supports several elements of Castle Point's plan, including its economic strategy and transport proposals and approach to gypsy and traveller accommodation, it raises significant concerns regarding the housing strategy. Specifically, Castle Point's plan proposes to deliver only 6,196 homes over the plan period, which falls well short of its identified housing need of 12,512 dwellings, as calculated by the government standard methodology. The response sets out that this shortfall renders the plan neither legally compliant nor sound under the National Planning Policy Framework. It also highlights the lack of robust evidence to justify the dismissal of alternative spatial strategies and confirms that Rochford District Council is not in a position to accommodate any unmet needs arising from Castle Point. Additional comments are provided on specific site allocations, including the Kiln Road campus, where we emphasise the importance of protecting educational and recreational facilities and ensuring infrastructure impacts are properly mitigated. The response also encourages Castle Point Borough Council to continue to engage with Rochford through established forums such as South Essex Councils and the Essex Planning Officers Association, and proposes the agreement of a statement of common ground to document areas of alignment. It's recommended that the committee approves the submission of this response before the consultation deadline of the 26th of September. I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Quilter. 26th of September, this one, bit earlier, but any comments? Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I do have one question, which is on the duty to cooperate again. There's a statement that we've put in there. RDC is satisfied with a significant amount of cross-boundary engagement with Castlepoint Borough Council, including through the South Essex Councils and Essex Planning Officers Association. Is that officer? I'm assuming that's officer to officer, is it? Because I can categorically say in 2 years that I was attending SEC. Nothing about this at all. So that's why I just want clarity on that particular statement and when those meetings happened.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Newport. Yes, so obviously the discussions do happen at the officer level for both South Essex Councils and the Essex Planning Officers Association. Certainly, with regards to the duty to cooperate, it's for Castle Point to demonstrate that they have met that requirement. So what I would say is obviously clearly when they do submit their plan, they will need to include what's called a duty to cooperate statement, and so they would need to evidence all of the activity that they've undertaken to support the preparation of their plan in a similar fashion, obviously, that we will need to do for our plan going forward. So the process works both directions. Obviously, I haven't got details of all meeting dates offhand now, but in terms of obviously that information, we'll need to compile that as the plan progresses. The mentioning of statements of common ground is important because that really does guide an inspector in respect of where the issues lie between the two authorities. So obviously there's principal matters that have been set out within our response. Clearly they would be the headline issues, particularly in terms of the unmet need that has been identified, and also in terms of the exploration of alternative options, i.e. meeting that need and how that's been tested. Certainly that would make the main issues that we would want to be discussing in terms of our attendance at any future examination hearings. But certainly in terms of the general requirements of the duty to cooperate, is it something that cannot be done retrospectively. So I think it's very important that if we were in a position to say they hadn't met the duty to cooperate, it works from the position that you need to obviously explain that there is serious shortcomings. And from our perspective, as it stands, there isn't the evidence to say that has not taken place. We have had discussions with officers, particularly around those the more technical matters, obviously, that we engage with at officer level. But I do appreciate, obviously, as you just described, there's obviously the aspect of the member level discussions and where they take place and where those issues are identified. But certainly from the position of where we've set this out, we don't identify any specific duty to cooperate issues at this time.
Councillor Newport.
Yes, so Chairman, I do take issue with the statement because I think that members would have expected the same as when you were on a cellar or Councillor Steptoe, when I attended SEC, that would be reported back to SEC, that those conversations had happened. And I'm not aware of those conversations, and obviously this is officers leading on what they think. So I don't agree with the statement being in there because in my opinion it didn't happen. So I won't support it. I can't, because the duty to cooperate isn't happening as it should, and it should be a combination of officers and members. I think that we all agree it should be a member-led authority, and members aren't getting the input into it.
Yeah, Councillor Newport, I do agree with you where South Essex Councils is concerned, and formerly a cellar, that is a member body. And I would need to see the evidence to be satisfied or given comfort that there has been appropriate debate specifically over Castle Point's local plan, bearing in mind it's a member outcome. I have less of a concern because we must accept that officers do have similar groups, and if they're able to support their technical discussions through those similar groups. It's perfectly reasonable, in my opinion, for them to be able to put that in there. But I do take very strongly your point about the member group of South Essex councils. If it's in their minutes, if it's recorded and decisions have been made or discussion has been had, then I'm more relaxed. But to my knowledge, I'm not aware of any reporting. But the subtlety here is that's a member organisation, collaboration between South Essex councils, unlike the planning officers. So I think that needs to be noted and adjusted. I agree with you totally on that point. Councillor Steptoe, I can see your hand.
Yes, Chairman, just a question. I know that the numbers that the Castle Point are suggesting for their plan falls well short of their allocated amount from government. What is the likely outcome from the inspector? My feeling is that he's going to reject it, and then what's the procedure? Do we then they have to come back to us with another plan and we go through this process yet again?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. So, yeah, I don't want to speculate, obviously, in terms of what may happen in their examination, but certainly in terms of what an inspector would want to consider is what is the justification for not meeting that need. So, obviously, the point that we've raised is effectively looking at, have they fully tested what the impacts would be if they were to meet all that need in essence? So, is there an option to that effect? And so certainly that's the concern that we've raised, and it's for Castle Point to answer that, and that's for them to justify. But certainly we've raised that concern that we're not satisfied, that they have explored all available options, whatever they may be. Obviously, it's for them to consider that. That's their jurisdiction. But we want to, I think, obviously, clearly, an inspector would want to have that justification, even if it was to be accepted. Whether that's likely or not, I don't want to speculate on that. Obviously, clearly the government's prerogative at the moment is for growth to happen, and obviously they've adjusted that standard methodology for a reason to meet that 1.5 million over the parliamentary period, and each local authority is expected to play their part in that. If the situation arose that the inspectors advised that plan is deficient, and that was at the outset, it may well be a case that there's obviously discussions that would happen, but they may recommend that the plan's withdrawn, and that there may be different circumstances that arise that cause that. If that was to be the case, then in essence they would have to formally withdraw the plan from examination, and then they would effectively go back a step. So they could go just back to a Regulation 19 stage, or they could even go back further to Regulation 18 stage. But ultimately that would be a decision for members at Castle Point on that at that point in time.
So out of interest, if it is rejected, the thought goes through my mind, we need to be careful, but if it is accepted, then we perhaps need to consider we do the same. I think it's going to be a bit of a test case. The other concern I had was that if it is rejected, is there any likelihood that the inspector will come back to us and say that the duty to cooperate with us as Rochford hasn't been sufficient, and in effect force us into accepting some development to meet their needs?
Yeah, thank you. So I think that situation is there's a long way to go, and I think it'd be very unlikely that an inspector, whatever an inspector is appointed, they're going to be obviously looking at the Castle Point local plan. So that they can only really have the jurisdiction over that plan and the area that it covers. As I said earlier, in terms of our plan, as we prepare that, so obviously we equally will be scrutinised, and we need to demonstrate or justify our approach, whatever that may be, and what needs we're meeting. That'll be for us to answer to that question, really, as to whether we fulfilled the duty to cooperate. The terminology talks around meaningful engagement, and obviously it cannot be done retrospectively. So certainly, as I said earlier, Castle Point will be in a position whereby they need to demonstrate that they've undertaken that engagement appropriately, and again, the inspector will assess that. So I think from the perspective of any prospect of an inspector guiding Castle Point, or consequently us, to take on their unmet need, I think that would be very unlikely in that circumstance. As I say, there will be in terms of Castle Point making those requests, they would have to make them formally. But I think they equally have to explore what's possible. So, from our perspective in the response, as we've responded, we're making it very clear that we're not able to take on those unmet needs. So that's our position, effectively.
I think Castle Point's history of planning, their planning schemes and their ideas have struggled right the way through. I don't think they've ever actually had one that's been agreed for one reason or another, but I could be wrong on that, not worried about that. But I think I'd be happy to accept the recommendation with just a caveat, we wish them luck with their figures.
It is interesting as an observation to see a target being set down by central government and a submission being made which is significantly short of that target. We are not comfortable with the target, but we are looking at considered reasons why that target isn't appropriate in the Rochford district, not least the growth of population and the inconsistency, large proposed growth of housing, which is way in excess of the need of the district. And yet, you've got Castle Point coming forward with a proposal and just blatantly submitting 50% or less of their target. It's a bit strange. And all of us within this authority want to take a responsible position, but if it's tempting just to see what happens.
The 26th of September. Yeah.
It does sort of question that, if there's not going to be central sanction, why are any of us bothering? It raises that fundamental question that, we try and approach this subject very responsibly, a hell of a lot of work that goes into it, and we take a responsible position. But it is my wish that in us taking responsibility, we aren't shown up by those authorities that choose to submit different target figures.
Just confirm, the officer said the date of mid-September. I meant, when does it have to be submitted to the inspector?
I don't know the expected dates of what they're proposing for their submission, but I would assume that it's going to be either by the end of this year or early next year, I suspect, because knowing from experience the amount of work that goes into, once you've done your Regulation 19, you've got to compile all the responses and then get all the evidence prepared to be submitted. But I think it would be fairly swift, relatively so. So I'd say at the latest, probably early next year, if they're able to proceed to that on that basis.
So we can watch it very closely.
As I'm sure many people will be, Councillor Steptoe. Yeah, Councillor Eaves, did I see you?
Yeah, thank you. Just a point of order at first. Are we still quorate?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No problem.
Yeah, okay, great. So can I just be clear? I understand Councillor Steptoe has laboured this, but I'm still not clear. Castle Point are ahead of us in their submission. So are they then going to be submitting their plan ahead of us, or are they going to wait till the last minute? Because I'm thinking of the obvious implication is, okay, they're putting a vastly reduced amount of housing in their proposals, and it would be interesting to see what the reaction is before we put ours in.
Okay. Are there any other comments before we look at the recommendation? Did you want to modify the recommendation? Yeah, but with
Councillor Woodson, I think the point that Councillor Newport made was one perhaps we need to consider, because there was the aspect of duty to cooperate that I think he was saying that there wasn't a support of that aspect of the response from a member perspective, that they felt that should be highlighted, I think.
Yes, and I'd agree with that. Yeah. I'm not sure we need to necessarily make that a recommendation, but it should be noted so that, you know, in the minutes, that's the purpose of the minutes, just to reflect on the key things. And I think throughout the whole of the meeting, we've emphasised the points, and I'm sure you as officers have made notes of certain things so that it all comes together. Otherwise, we'd have an endless list of recommendations. But it's a point well made. But we can't lose sight of neither Councillor Newport nor I, but I suspect others may support the sentiment that if there's statements made about a body, there has to be the backing evidence to support those statements. And Councillor Newport and I both have questions. There may be supporting statements, but whereas officers can have their meetings, and that's perfectly reasonable to discuss the technical, and that's a perfectly reasonable statement, we can't assume without the appropriate evidence that a seller, or South Essex Councils as it now is, has had a proper discussion over the Castle Point local plan. So we just need to be a bit careful on that. That's all I would say, and the minutes will reflect that. Yeah, lovely. All right. So if you agree, members, I'll turn to the recommendation, and that's R1 on page 83, that a formal response as attached at Appendix A is submitted to Castle Point Borough Council's 2025 Castle Point Plan Draft Regulation 19, consultation within the prescribed time period. Do I have agreement? That is 4, and as the other 2 members have left, that is unanimous within those of us that are left. Right, and finally, members, and thank you for your indulgence and patience, we turn to item 10, and I think this is going to be led by the Director of Place, Ms Goodings.
Thank you. So just very briefly, members, just to confirm that because you have approved the local development scheme timetable at this committee, we will be updating the work plan to reflect that. So you'll see the various evidence-based reports and draft local plan, etc., will be going into the work plan for the next meeting in October. Also, just to bring to members' attention, they have gone in the diary, but we have proposed additional meetings for the local for the Planning Policy Committee. So just to confirm, we've got meetings on the 9th of October, the 25th of November and the 7th of January. And they then lead us into a council meeting on the 26th of January. So just to confirm, they have gone out, but just to confirm those are the dates, and the work plan will be updated to reflect those.
Have those dates been sent out on the calendar?
They have, but I've asked them to be to make sure that they're widely circulated amongst members on a updated calendar of all meetings, and I'm sure Member and Democratic Services will make a note of that for that to happen. Good. So if there's no other comments, we'll turn to the recommendation that the committee notes and endorses its work programme for the remainder of the municipal year and considers any further items that need to be added. Is that noted? Noted. Thank you very much. Members, at 21:40, 20 to 10, we close this meeting. Thank you very much indeed for your contribution. Much appreciated. And also to Councillor Marriott for attending tonight. So thank you very much. Meeting closed.